In 2012, Top Gear did a feature about Chinese cars, and they predicted that 10 years on from then, we'd all be driving the vehicles. 13 years on, and as you can tell, we're not all driving Chinese cars, but they have made immense progress. Take this BYD Seal, for example. It's got a capacious boot around 400 litres, but there's more to it than that, as I shall now explain. As I was saying, we're not all driving Chinese cars, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be. Take this BYD Seal, for example. On the surface, things look good. It starts from around £45,000, which undercuts many of its German rivals like the Porsche Taycan, BMW i4 and Audi e-tron Quattro. Its range is around 300 miles too, very similar to the BMW I drove a few weeks ago, and its power, just under 500 brake horsepower, which is enough for anyone. But there's more to cars than just numbers and statistics. Let's see how it drives. Now it's time for the driving bit. Unfortunately in the BYD Seal that's very easy. Simply get in, put on your seatbelt, you press the stop button, put it into D, look around to see who's who, who's where, who's what, and where you're going, and away you go. Now of course, we're currently in a gravel car park in South London, so we're not going to be testing the limits of grip, suspension, or anything like that, but we can test its manoeuvrability. And certainly it's very easy to use. I can see all four corners of the car. And I can also see my cameraman Jonathan. Very nice chap indeed. So it's nice and light. It's when you get out on the road that things get a little bit more special. I've currently got the car in sports steering but normal suspension, which means I've got plenty of feel, and that's what I want to talk about first of all, because in the past electric cars they haven't had any feel through steering, which means you've had very little idea as to what's going on. Whereas with this, there's proper steering feel, just like the Audi e-tron Quattro, which means I've got a very good idea as to what the front wheels and the rear wheels are doing. What's more, the suspension is also very supple. It's absorbing the London's lumps and bumps very well, even in the sportiest suspension mode. There's not much road noise. It's very quiet. You know, it's very insulating. You know, even when you're going over a very rough potholed road, it doesn't get that sort of sense from in here. It's very comfortable, and as you know, and as I said earlier, the touchscreen's very easy to use. I can make changes without having to look away from the road, and in this case, the cyclists around me. And it's just so nice to be in another electric car, which, like the Audi e-tron Quattro, has proper suspension feel, is really communicating to you and giving you proper information. There are areas where it does feel a bit less premium. There's some of the materials are a bit less premium than they do in like maybe a German car manufacturer. But remember, yes, BYD is a few years old, but they've only been in the UK for a matter of years. Give them a chance. And there's one thing you can't get over, and that's the price. This is cheaper than the BMW, cheaper than the Audi, cheaper than rivals from Porsche. And I think it's easy to look down on Chinese cars because they're not the establishment manufacturers, but this is a genuine, serious competitor, because at the end of the day, cars like this aren't about setting lap times. They're not about, you know, British B roads. They're about comfort and ease of use. They're about making your life relaxing. And this does. So yeah, it's a good start. And yes, I have some things to address I will point out later on. But that's for a little bit later. Now we're done with the driving, let's talk a little bit about the interior of the Seal. Starting with, of course, the massive great sunroof above you, which is of course reinforced in case anything should happen to you. But that's not the main feature of the BYD Seal. Yes, there are lots of large and capacious cubby holes, but there's more to it than that. Now, of course, BYD has followed one of the big trends of automotive design in recent years, which is to have a socking great touchscreen in the middle of the car. But whilst touchscreens get a lot of stick, and of course buttons are fortunately making a comeback, this one is actually incredibly usable, because whilst it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, when you've got those activated, it puts the shortcuts within very close touching distance of the steering wheel. And this means that, let's just say you want to change it from Google Maps to Spotify, you don't have to take your eyes off the road because it's all very close, which makes it very usable. Yes, there are sub-menus to turn off the driving assists and so on and so forth, but importantly, it saves your preferences, it saves your settings, which means when you get back in again, you don't have to go through all those sub-menus, which actually makes it quite usable. Yes, again, I would prefer if there were more buttons and more physical shortcuts. But as a first attempt, it's really rather good. So the BYD Seal, it's a pretty good car, all things considered, but it's not perfect. Name any car which is. And the first of those problems is the front trunk to you and me. It's only 50 litres, you might think that's actually quite sizable, but really, you can't expect more given how much space you should have when you haven't got an engine in there. And it's big enough, in fairness, to a couple of bags of shopping, but are you really going to chuck your shopping in the front, or are you going to go around to the back? It's not a big problem, just a thing to consider. And now that's before we get to the rear. Second problem comes around to the rear. Like many modern cars, you can fold the seats flat, which is all very jolly and helpful, but it's once they're flat that you come across an issue. Because this object here, in most cars, that's a parcel shelf which you can take out and throw away so you can get big, bulky objects in. But in this, it's fixed, which means you can't, say, for example, fit a bicycle in, which is what I did with the i4 a few weeks ago. And it does mean that it sort of limits what you can put in here, because most cars you can put it all in through the boot or through the side. Here, you're limited by what you can put in, and I really hope for the next model they replace the speakers with just a bit of cardboard, because then it will give it a lot more versatility and usability. So after a week with the BYD Seal, what do we think? Well, actually, that is really rather good. It's reasonably practical, reasonably priced, reasonably brisk, and reasonably easy to use. Yes, there are a few problems, little ones, like you can't remove the rear parcel shelf, and there is a steering anomaly, which I discuss below. Otherwise, it's a very, very compelling alternative to the likes of the BMW i4, for example. And that's got me thinking, why do Brits buy Chinese cars other than the fact that they're competitively priced, which they are, and also relatively easy to use, as I discovered with the Seal? And it's because they're the underdog. Yes, BYD and JICO are massive companies in China, but over here, when they're going up against the likes of Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, Audi, Jaguar and the rest, they're the underdog. And Brits, we've always really rather liked the underdog. We've always rooted for them because they can sometimes upset the establishment order. And I know what you're thinking. That is not a BYD Seal, and you'd be right. That is what's coming next.